Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art. Good morning. This is Chris Miller with the Spiritual Artist Podcast. It is a nice, cool morning here in Dallas, and I am speaking with Susie deVille, and I'm excited to talk about this author and artist and entrepreneur. Susie deVille is a speaker, author, and founder and CEO of the Innovation and Creativity Institute, a coaching firm connecting entrepreneurs and business leaders to their innate capabilities, guiding them to lead from a place of creative confidence. Susie is on a mission to show entrepreneurs and creators the power of trusting themselves and how to work lighter while making higher profits. Her book, Buoyant, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Becoming Wildly Successful, Creative, and Free, is available wherever books are sold. Good morning, Susie. How are you?
Good morning. I am terrific. Thank you for having me on.
I am so excited to have you on. We chatted, I think it was last week, briefly on the phone, and immediately had wonderful rapport. And since then, I ordered your book, and I will show the listeners. If you're listening to this on the podcast, you can't see this, but you should see the copy of her book. I have it tagged up and down with all these inspirational words that I want to bring up. So I don't know if we have time for everything, but I loved it. It's a great book. I think what I love the most about it is that I could see parallel messages to my book, but presented in a totally different, unique, and creative way, which is what I preach and teach, is that we all are unique. And so I love hearing your story,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and it's lovely too, as I'm reading your book, which I have right here, by the way. I feel this fun thing that happens when there's a new consciousness evolving in a culture. And I know this has been happening for years, but there seems to be this groundswell happening now where lots of people from different parts of the world are sort of being attracted to this kind of message and understanding it from their own histories and their own experiences and their own spirituality. And so there's lots of interesting connections going on.
Yeah, I was going to try to foolishly control this conversation, and right away and I know that the creative process is not always about that, right? And it's about letting it flow. And you are right. There is there's a rule or a law for that, where an idea suddenly raises to the head all across the world. And it goes back to that there being one mind, there is one consciousness that we're all tapping into.
Yes. Isn't it the concept of emergence? It's
Yes.
like a biological phenomenon where all the fish turn and do something at the same time and no one's directing it. They're just all intuiting from their own center of leadership and autonomy, which is amazing.
That's exactly right. That's the exact word I was looking for. And it is correct. And it's so wild. I'm reading your book and I'm like, oh, there's my concept, right? You talk about solitude and silence in here. You talk about controlling your thoughts, of course. And so there's so many of the chapters that I talk about, I in here that align with my book. But but I love this, and I want to remind my listeners that you're coming from an entrepreneurial, a business perspective.
Yes.
Whereas, yeah. So that's really interesting. So I'm going to read something from your book, because as a starting point, just something really short, that gives us where we're going to talk about this part. And I love how, what's so funny and so refreshing in your book is you talk about the market, how does the market approach you? So why is it that we cannot pull our market right toward us and instead feel invisible to our ideal clients? Because we are invisible to ourselves. And I love that, because we're invisible to ourselves. And you go back and you later on clarify that, and you talk about agency,
Mhm.
Agency as the capacity, condition, or state of acting or of exerting power. And this is what I love about what you said. Now, let's be clear. I am talking about reclaiming your power, power over the self, not over other people, power to craft one's destiny, power to create moment to moment how you want to feel, power to choose, power to align your soul with meaning, power to bring your true self forward. And guess what lies underneath achieving agency? Making art, any medium, good, bad, recognizable, unrecognizable, fancy, and plain. So I love that because yes, 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 right? It is about finding your unique perspective and honoring that, right? I mean, honoring who you are.
Well, we're sort of laden with other people's expectations from the moment we arrive here. And it is a bit of doing to start to understand what is the true me and what has sort of glommed onto me from years of just going through school or parents' expectations or cultural lore, and getting to that true inner self is a journey that is beautifully assisted by making something, moving these hands, and letting ourselves get lost in the unknown and not feel this need to control an outcome, which as a control freak is hard. And also to be willing to surrender to experience this moment of crossing the threshold into the work, piercing the resistance veil, piercing the perfectionism veil, and letting yourself have this, there's a visceral moment that I experience every time I go from one side into the portal, and letting go of what the outcome is that you're doing, that you're creating, because it's not the point. And everything tells us something completely opposite. Everything is all about, is the work any good? Are you any good? Are you really an artist? And all of that is immaterial. It's the experience and it's what's happening to you while you're making. That is the point. And it is your path back to really understanding what you love, what brings you alive, and who you truly are.
I totally agree. And so what you've done is you've seen that and you look at the business world and talk about having outward messages, right? About what we are supposed to do in that microcosm of the business world, right? You're supposed to have a business plan. You're supposed to know ahead of time what exactly you want to do. You're supposed to define your client base. You're supposed to, all those rules. There's so many rules. And so sometimes you get, or not sometimes, oftentimes you get pulled from your center,
Yes.
you know?
Well, and those things that you just mentioned are fabulous tools. But the way that we're taught in the classic world of entrepreneurship is that those are the only important tools, those that emanate from the strategic mind. And we leave out this whole other part of us, which is our beautiful, intuitive, imaginative, ideating, creative self. And so if we put the creativity piece that's fueled by inspiration before the things that come from the strategic mind, then we're more readily able to stay in alignment with our true selves and not get so distracted by what everybody else is doing and sort of slumping into compare and despair. Oh, they're doing their business this way, or they're creating this thing that way. I therefore must follow that. And that is the slippery slope to the sort of death march of your passion, your energy, and your resonance in the market. Because if we're out of alignment, our energetic signals precede us. And so anything that we create or say or put into the market or launch sort of falls flat because people can intuit something's off. I can't quite put my hands around it, but I don't feel the connection here.
Yeah, I think that's really true. We can sense it on a level that I think we don't even understand, right?
Mm-hmm.
If something is genuine and truly supported by passion. And so if it's missing, and I don't know if we talked about this earlier, Susie, but I ran an ad agency for 25 years. And I can't tell you how many clients would call me in and say, we got to do more social media. And I'm like, you know what I mean? And I'm like, why? And they're like, because everybody's doing it. And without any idea of what they want to say or even what their message is. Because in that same conversation, you might sit down and say, tell me what you are. Tell me what your business is. And they just fumble with it. I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am.
So common. It is so common. And that work is such hard, deep work to be able to get to the root of who you truly are and then be able to articulate it in a way that it's indelible and resonant is tough work. But that's the key to absolutely everything. And the great news is that your artistic and creative practice is your playful way to set sail on that particular journey of discovery. And it is one of surprise and delight. It does not have to be white knuckling and horrible and, painful. If we let it be fun and let it be simple and let it be easy, that's exactly what our experience will be. And those answers and those intuitive hits will come, and we'll start to really pay attention to the signals of magic and synchronicities and clues and support that are popping up. As we get closer and closer, warmer and warmer, we get the feedback that you're on track, or no, maybe turn a little this way, or maybe turn a little that way. And we can feel in our own bodies too, when we're off path or when we're right on dead center. It's like hearing someone play something on the piano that is in complete harmony, and we can feel that vibrate through us in a way that is clean and completely joyful to hear.
Yeah, I actually encourage that in my book, but I talk about, and I painted last night. I do agree. It is very important to keep that in your life. And I'll tell you, I'm guilty of it too. I start getting busy. I'll be, I have to record a podcast. I'll have to do this. And I'm like, but did you paint? Did you paint today? Or, but when you do, in that maintaining, for me, it's feeling that state. I've learned to feel for the state of when you're in that place of conscious connection. And also I love how you talk about this too. That's when the ideas come, right? You're just sitting there.
Yes.
Boom. You get this clear shot. And I've had some interesting stories. I've literally had things come in. I have to let someone go. Like I've been painting and I'm like, I have to let that employee go. They're not working for me. It's not, we're not a match. Or oh, I need to make that phone call. And suddenly this inspired, right? You're just like, suddenly someone pops in your mind, and then you reach out to that person and they have work for you or a reason to connect. So it is an incredible skill.
It's really funny because when I'm in my strategic, quote unquote, left brain, and I know the science now says, no, there's no left, there's no right. But just for argument's sake, let's say that there is a division that's clear. When I'm in that state, I'm in a position of wanting to protect something. I'm wanting certainty. I'm wanting control. And those are great skills to have for certain tasks. But it's kind of like when we were kids and we would play telephone with cans and strings and we would pretend like we could have real conversations. That's kind of the level of connection that we have with our soul when we're in that highly strategic left analytical mind. But when we're over in that place of creating and just doing, as you said, what's happening here? And I don't really care. I'm just enjoying it. There is like a taproot into the depths of us, under the leagues of things that we don't even know are there. And then this complete intuitive hit just comes rushing to the surface. And it can be, as you said, a clue about something in your business or a new direction you want to take. I see with people who are in my sketchbook entrepreneur masterclass, I can watch what happens on their faces in real time when the program idea lands, or that articulation of their messaging just gels, and the relief and the ecstasy and sometimes tears because the hope has returned, and they feel, and it's not just about solving the issue or solving the problem. It's about understanding I now have access to something that I lost somewhere along the way, and I don't know when that happened, but now I have it back. And it's completely rejuvenating and empowering.
Yeah, I love that. We'll one of the things I tried to organize this, but I think I'm just going to flow with it. Because that's it. My control. I'm like you. I have to-do lists, action items, and all this. And then I know when you step into it, part of the creative process is about trusting yourself, right? Just stepping into and trusting that I will know what to say and following this conversation. And so when you do that, when they practice that and they start getting those hits, I think what it does is it helps people connect back to their trust in who they are.
1000%, which is the path out of this pervasive sense that so many of us have, which is I'm not good enough, my work is not good enough, some variation of the imposter syndrome, which is what tends to put us on that perfectionism path, which is followed by fear of being judged. Like we feel like the work isn't going to be good enough, so we don't feel confident in sharing the work. Then we get on the overachieving gerbil wheel, thinking somehow if I collect credentials and pieces of paper, things that say I have value, it's going to make me feel better, and it does not. And then we think productivity is going to be it, because if we just get out there and burn those boats and hustle and make it happen and make it rain and all those things, that's going to be the solution too. And that just leads you into overwhelm and burnout, and then you're stuck. So this path back to self-trust is like this chisel on the concrete of the exterior of us, and it reverses all of that, and it connects us back into remembering what it is that brings us alive. And we remember, oh my gosh, I have so many clients who say, I used to write poetry, or I used to sing, or I used to cook every day. And I haven't done that for years. And I can't even tell you why I stopped doing that. So we get these little inside tips from who we truly are as we start to build our path back to crossing that mode of self-doubt over to self-trust. And it empowers us, and it gives us this new sense of clarity that has eluded us because our brain has been muddled in this world of go for it, go for it. I don't think I have what it takes. Go for it, go for it. I don't think I have what it takes. And it's a push me, pull you state of being confused and muddled and not willing to step into the unknown and not tolerate the uncertainty that comes with being an artist, that comes with being an entrepreneur.
Right. I was thinking about what you said there. and it reminded me of something in your book, which I think is important. So I'm going to encourage my listeners. We're talking about being creative and entering into a space of letting things happen. But I'm going to go back and say, but there is discipline. There is a discipline. And I'm remembering something I read in your book, which I really liked. It's, we have to look at our lives and see what is contributing, what is helping us step closer to what we love. And sometimes making the hard decisions that what wears us down, what takes away those moments of creativity, is that we let things get in that aren't bringing us joy. We give our time and effort to things that don't bring us joy. And so in your book, you clearly say, okay, once you know who you start getting that grasp of who you are, you can start making the decisions, and it's work, right? Where do I want to spend my time?
Well, and it's also a decision that I'm going to heal and protect my sacred creative energy. And that is something that requires boundaries. And boundaries don't have a real positive rap in our culture either. Because even though there's a lot of lore around, the importance of setting good boundaries and strong boundaries and all of that, the people who are great at that tend to be couched as tough or aloof or insensitive. And we fear, because we're communal animals, right? We don't want to be cast out of the tribe or out of the circle. We fear that if we do set the strong boundaries, we're going to be cast out or we're going to be looked upon unfavorably. But those are the hard choices and the hard decisions. But you can actually start small and work your way up to some of the ones that make you break out into a sweat. And I do encourage people to start out with making kind of a boundaries wish list. And I did this recently with a client who was very hesitant to even talk about it with me, what her real fantasies over boundaries would be. And I said, well, you go with your journal, and it's just you and your journal and your pencil, and you're going to just write out the fantasy without censoring yourself of how it's going to happen, or could this even be possible for me? And so she started there, and then we picked the smallest one on her list to do, which was something that it was just a boundary for herself, which was to give herself a good 30 minutes minimum every morning, where she can start her day in the manner and fashion that is important for her creative energy and her sense of calm and her sense of clarity. So she started with that, and I said, let's just make that a habit first, and then we can graduate up this list to the ones that are a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, I love that. I will tell you that 5 a.m. is early for me.
Yeah.
I read your book and I was like, and you recommend to get up early, and I'm going to let you explain those a little bit. The 5 M's, you have 5 practices that are very important to have in your life. But I will tell you this. I did get up early. I tried it, and I will continue to do it. I got up early this week, and I actually had time to record. I do small podcasts. I had time to record a small podcast in the morning. And so one of the things you talk about is learning where your energy flows. We're all different. And putting those critical things, those things that you're just passionate about, give them the time, give them your high energy time. Is that,
yes.
Am I saying that correctly?
That is 1000% correct. And let me just say first, for anybody who is currently breathing into a brown paper bag over the thought of having to get up at 5 a.m., I do want to let you know that what I call the creative circadian rhythms of us are very different for each of us. So mine just happened to be early in the morning, insanely early. Now I'm a 3 a.m. person.
Oh my God.
But I have figured that out over experimenting and trying things, because each of us has this window of time, and some of us get blessed with 2. I have some clients who have one during sort of a morning time period, and then they have another sort of second creative wind somewhere around 9 o'clock at night. That is absolutely not true for me. My window is 3 a.m. to about 10 or 11. And that is when I will do all of the critical creating and deep work that I want to do for that day. And so that could be writing, that can be painting, that can be doing an interview with someone, that can be pitching an idea to someone, whatever it is that is going to really require that I show up at my highest and best is happening during that window. What we tend to do is, first of all, we don't readily identify what that window is for us, or windows, plural. And so we let the sort of minutia of the world and our day take the reins or take the wheel. And so we're burning through this critical energy doing work that could be done at a low energy time of the day. Perfectly fine. So we'll get into the inboxes and we'll start looking at news, or we'll start responding to the amygdala pings of the emails that we get. And that just, meanwhile, is just the draining the tank of our, creative verve and our ability to do our best work. So I suggest that in order to figure out what your windows are, is to try to track it at least over the course of a week or two, and experiment and see which times of the day you're really on fire. And do you have a second wind at some point? Or do you have something completely unusual in the terms of the cultural lore? And I have a friend who, when he has a big project, he will take what he calls a caffeine nap, which means he will drink a cup of coffee at 9 o'clock at night, which just to me is horrifying. Take a 20-minute nap, and then he works from 9:30 until like 4. And he cranks it out during that time period. There's no way on this earth I could possibly do it. But he has found, over experimenting and over, time, that that's his zone. So I also have some parents who are saying, what am I supposed to do when my height of my creative circadian rhythm happens to be when I'm supposed to be picking up the kids after school, or doing homework, or whatever obligation or responsibility I have? So as long as we're aware and we do our best to, it's not a foolproof system, because life is unpredictable, but you can still understand and plan for some things and try to barter with, can I trade some childcare over here, or somebody take the carpool duties for this project time for me today? We can be a little bit more careful about protecting that time, understanding that, of course, that we can't maybe do it every single day.
Right. Well, a couple things you said that I love. One is, well, I love this conversation because I hope our listeners realize you can see how everybody has different rhythms. For me and you, the idea of being up at 9 o'clock and drinking 9:30 at night and having coffee, and right. But, understanding that everybody's different, we're all different, and how creativity flows through us, how conscious connection flows through us is always unique. And so I love remembering that. I think I am more like you. I like the early mornings, but not that early.
Yeah.
But 6 a.m. is good. But I tried to do a yoga routine once at 5 a.m. and had to drive somewhere for it. And I did that for about 3 months. I was pretty good. I was like, this is just not for me. But I think it's important. And I want to remind the listeners, so many of them are artists and creators, where are you putting your creative time? Like, when are you choosing to do what you love? And it's funny, when I read your book, I realized, I've been painting late at night. Like, I get everything else done and then I go paint. And isn't that a mistake, right? For me.
It's the classic thing that we do it with our money too, right?
Right.
We'll see what's left after we pay all the bills, and then we'll choose maybe to invest that. or we do that with our energy and our time. I created, as you've read in the book, something called the 7-inch plate, which can help us be aware of keeping some time to ourselves and not just load up our schedules with so much activity and so many different responsibilities that we don't have any white space in our calendars. We don't have any rivers of buffer time so that we can transition from certain kinds of tasks, like creative tasks, into the more strategic or administrative work that we might be doing. But it is this taskmaster part of us. And this is definitely a challenge for me, where there's almost like this invisible person behind me with a whip saying, okay, you really need to do blah, 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 blah. Then you can reward yourself with this fun thing that you love to do. But here's what's so interesting. I challenge people who have the same wiring that I have to reward yourself first, and then watch how that absolutely changes the tone and tenor and results of the work that you're doing after that. It's pretty amazing.
That's a wonderful, wonderful concept, wonderful exercise, because and that's so much what this book is about. It's about making sure that you refuel yourself, right?
Yes.
and refuel that creativity. And you're right, especially here in our society, in America, we're so like organized and efficient, and we don't take that time to even honor that. Let's go back to that side of the brain, although you're right, they've said it's all mixed up, but we don't. We get so that there's no creativity. I was in at work, in a meeting, and we had a guy come in and do some consulting, and he told us we should take what's called clarity breaks. And I looked around the room of this boardroom, and everybody sitting at the table, they were blank. They were like, what? They had what? A clarity break. They couldn't even conceptualize the idea of just sitting down and just taking a moment. But that's when, I believe, that's when spirit or divine intuition, that's when it comes to us, That
is the source waters of some of our best problem solving and ideation. And we're so trained to think it's fluffy, frivolous stuff for people who are crafty or retired or have time to kill, but not for us serious, folks who have responsibilities and jobs and businesses and things like that. We don't have time for any of that. And I get pushback from people all the time, and I have so much compassion and empathy for it, because that was absolutely how I used to be too. And that's why I have this sort of Scarlett O'Hara carrot over my head, as God is my witness, of I'm going to help people get this message, because once you finally let that sink in and change how you move and how you embrace a joyful life and business of flow and ease, by topping off your inspiration tank every single day, it is such a game changer in everything that you're doing. And so, and it's doesn't have to be complicated, doesn't have to take tons of time. People think, oh God, I'm going to have to get up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to have to spend 3 hours doing this stuff. No, I don't have to, no, I know that you can start with 5 minutes, and I know that's enough. And I know that builds, and there's the power of accumulation. And then you'll pick up some habits that just become a part of who you are, and you just stop even having to think about it. So it doesn't have to be an all or nothing approach, which is, again, another one of my favorite things. Oh, it's got to be, I have to scale Everest by Friday or it's not going to work.
Right. You just try to take it all. But I love it because I love the imagery of like a cruise liner or something to turn a huge ship. It's just if even at 0.5 degrees, right? It's where you'll be down the line. And just be willing to start shifting. I love this because it's about refilling your tank. It's about spending your time on what is core to who you are. I would call it your creative DNA. I would say what is unique unto you, and really feeding that side of yourself. I was going to ask you. So one of the things that I've realized is you have to let go sometimes of things that aren't feeding you, and that's a hard one, right?
It is really hard when, first of all, those things that are not feeding us, that are bottoming out our energy and our willingness and our sense of self, those are handy to have in place because a lot of times we are afraid of this force that's within us. Dylan Thomas talks about creativity as the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. And I love that imagery because I can feel when I'm in that river of creating, I can feel that force in me. And sometimes it feels like it's just going to overtake me. Sometimes it feels like it's just going to like almost drown me. And we can have as sort of initiates on this path, this intuitive hit that maybe this is going to be too much for me and I'm not going to be able to handle it. And so we'll find ways to turn that valve off, to turn that connection off, to wall ourselves off from ourselves. And there's lots of lovely ways we do it. I'll tell you the way I used to do it. One of my go-tos was working constantly. That's a real creativity killer right there. 80-hour weeks in the real estate world, constantly on call. Sunday morning at 7:00, if you called me and said, I want to go see 123 Main Street, I'd be like, I'll be right over. I had no boundaries around that kind of thing. Worked all the time. I also used food and wine to not feel what I was feeling. So, and I also discovered that I wanted to not think what I was thinking too. So if I'm going all the time and I'm then coming home and consuming things that are making me feel dull and sleepy and leaden, those are fabulous habits to have if you don't want to know who you truly are or feel or think what you're truly thinking and feeling. So we have to kind of step into this shallow end of the pool of self-discovery in a gentle way and recognize we all have these ways of separating ourselves and that we're not singled out as the only ones who are struggling with this. We're all in great company in doing this. And if we take, let's say, the first of the 5 M's, which is morning pages, and this is a beautiful creation of Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way. 3 pages of longhand writing in a journal in the morning, just a quick brain dump. We're not writing prose. We're not worrying about sentence structure. We're just getting what's in our minds that's causing us anxiety out onto the page. That right there, that 1 M, if you do it consistently, will start to help you identify where these particular habits are that are not serving you, not serving your creativity, and are separating you from yourself, because you're going to be writing about them. I'm so tired. I took another client in the middle of, somebody texted me at 10 p.m. and I got up and answered it. True story. So we'll see these things appear in our morning pages and we'll start to go, wait a second. I don't think this is perhaps the best, healthiest path for me. And so it will unfold for you in a very organic way. And you don't have to take action immediately. You can just simply observe it for a while. And then there'll be a moment where you will have this very interesting sense of self-determination. And you will say, I am done with this particular way of acting in the world. And now I'm going to do something about it. But if we try to rush to get to that place, it won't feel like we're coming at it from our own direction, that maybe we're being asked to do it for the wrong reasons from the external world. But if we let it be coming from our own desires, and again, not discipline, but desires. I desire to feel better. I desire to have more energy. I desire to have great sleep. I desire to feel a lightness of being. That keeps you into this zone of empowered action and decision making that is so much more effective over the long term than, again, this discipline, this you must, white knuckle your way through
Right.
the broccoli and the workouts at the gym.
So you said something in there that I would love to tease out a little bit. You said that you have a moment of self-determination. Let's talk about that. Where does that come from, do you think? I mean,
I believe that we have this immense inner wisdom that is matched by a soul that has never forgotten what it is that it dreams of and wants to express through us. And it's always sort of tapping at the door. And we have, sort of like if you think about somebody in a Manhattan apartment with the 40 locks and chains and things and the stick in the door, we have those kinds of same mechanisms of protection against the hearing our soul speak to us. And so as we are engaging in the 5 M's, we're turning these locks, taking the chains down, taking the stick away. And those bids from our soul can then be heard. And that's when we start to catch this, almost like this feeling in our stomachs. It's a tickly, somersaulty feeling of, oh my gosh, I think that's possible for me. And we start to follow that rather than keep the lights dark and staying in this path of, I must work and overachieve my way to a sense of self.
So in a way, we are relaxing into, I'm going to say this, we are relaxing into the abundance that we already have, right? I mean, underneath it all.
And the intuition.
Yeah. Just this abundance of creative energy and ideas and support, but we block it with, and so I agree with you. I was going back to what you said about the morning pages. I did the morning pages for a long time. It's actually where my book came from. I would write morning pages when I went on retreat. And after about 8 years, I had a book.
I love it.
Because, but what I do like, I would like to share with the listeners is what happens is it gives you some distance from your thoughts. When you write morning pages, it gives you a buffer. And then you go back and you read it and even try it just for a month. Even if you just want to try a little, like you said, take it small steps, do it for a month and then reread it. And what I realized is that I would keep going back to thoughts of lack, fear of money, insecure thoughts, fear of what people think of me. I would see that I would keep talking about what people are thinking of me. And so I think the morning pages, it's a great tool, and it's a very strong structural tool in your book, the writing. And obviously you are a writer. I guess you write first thing in the morning.
I do. I actually start with morning pages, and then I do my other writing, because I have found that it's almost like if I don't do morning pages, being in a room where there's a fluorescent light that has a bad bulb and it's just flickering, and you're aware that there's an annoyance in your environment, and it's causing you to not think clearly. That's the way I feel if I don't have my morning pages time. And it's so interesting to see how the patterns emerge, as you pointed out, because we think, oh, I just had a weird thought today. And then you're like, but I also had that same thought on Wednesday and Friday. And then you start to go, I seem to have these seem to kind of be grouped into a certain kind of a bucket. And it doesn't now feel so unwieldy and so impossible to begin to dismantle, because it's the same thought showing up in different costumes. And once you can then start to dismantle that one kind of thought, then every time it tries to want to come up, you can just nip it in the bud before it even has a chance to, land fully into your mind.
When I was training to be a licensed spiritual coach, one of the activities we did is they pointed out to us, and I think this aligns with your book. We don't realize that who we are, who I am, who Chris is really a combination of all the belief systems and thoughts that I was raised with, that I was handed down from my family, from society around us. Being an American is a certain thought way of thinking, and that's all handed to us. So what these morning pages do is you get to step back and go, oh, this is what was handed to me, but I choose differently. I choose to not be that, or I choose to enhance that. And so realizing, it's like we have a program and a script, and so many people spend their life just looping through that program that was put into place probably in the first 3 to 7 years of their life.
That's so true. And we find such incredible liberation when we understand, oh, that's a choice that I'm making. It's not a rule from on high that is making me miserable, that I have to continue to do every single day for the rest of my life. I can actually make a different decision, or I can choose to look at it in a different way. That right there is enough daylight in the dark cave of consciousness to set us on an entirely new path. And that is one of the many benefits of morning pages, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's and you talk about self-determination, or rather maybe even being empowered. That is when you're empowered, because then you can say, okay, do I truly feel this way? What I mean, whatever it might be. Let's just take a simple thought pattern you might have. You might have been taught that living in the city is dangerous. And then you go, is that true? Is that true that living in the city is dangerous? Or is something that I was told ever since I was a little kid, that it's more violent in a city as opposed to the country? And then you can choose to change it, change that belief. And suddenly you're in control of, you're designing yourself. You become the designer of your own life, right?
Well, I love, if you're familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza's work,
Yes.
One of the things that he taught me, one of the many things that he taught me, was that when we become really skilled in not letting a thought slip past our awareness unaddressed, then we've got it. Because we all have lack and attack fears. That is just a part of being a human being. That is a vestigial remainder of what used to keep us alive. Not being food for something else and finding food.
Exactly.
And so these still, even in our beautiful modern brains, and we have access to grocery stores, and we don't have to worry about the saber-toothed tiger on our commute, those things are still being pumped into us. And so if we understand I'm not unique in having these thoughts, That's one level of comfort and sense of empowerment. Then when you start to sort of get out of yourself and into the balcony of perspective and looking at what your thoughts are and not letting them go past your awareness unaddressed, then you can completely shift and start dismantling in the moment. If we get, again, as Dr. Dispenza would say, addicted to the chemicals that those thoughts produce in us, it's a second level of challenge to begin to dismantle them. Because if I'm all hooked on anxiety, and that's going to keep making my brain have thoughts that produce anxiety, those chemicals associated with that. So the going back to the 5 M's, those are all powerful ways to pattern interrupt so that you have that precious time and perspective to understand, this is me, this is not me. This thought is not true. This thought is not me. That my thoughts and myself, we are separate entities.
Right. So we didn't go through that. So I'm going to ask you to share with the listeners the 5 M's, because it's kind of the core of your program. So we talked about the first one, but would you take a minute and share the rest?
Sure. So the second is meditation. And I know for a lot of people that tends to bring up feelings of, well, I've tried meditation before. It's just not for me. Or thinking that it has to be some kind of lengthy, complicated process. I advocate that you can start sitting quietly for 5 minutes, simply in darkness and silence, just noticing what thoughts come up and not try to push them away. Just let whatever comes up come up, and just watch your breath and pay attention to sort of the rhythm of your body for 5 minutes. That's all you have to do. And you can slowly build that up over time. The third is movement, and that can take any number of outlets and applications. My favorite one is to do a 1-hour hike with my golden retriever every day. And I take along a little pocket journal and a pencil. It is also one of my best idea periods of the day. I do a lot of photographs during that hour. I let things that are beautiful stop me in my tracks, and I will lock onto it. I will sort of just have an energetic connection with that particular beautiful thing. And it's a lot of appreciation, a lot of awareness, and juicy ideas come during that time. The next is moments of inspired learning. Again, it can be very simple. I used to do just one clip of listening to a poet read his or her work, and that can be 1 minute or that can be 5 minutes. And again, that's more than enough, because you're just filling the inspiration well with a different way of connecting to the greater community of all of us, the sort of grand circle of humanity, as well as what is unique about your own soulful path. And then the final is the one that everyone always fights me on, but this group who's listening to this would not, and that's making something. And that is our pathway to activating and accessing our creativity back channels. And it can be as simple as a 5-minute doodle, a 5-minute sketch. It can be playing around in some paint for a little bit. It can be doing some collage work. It can be making like one of my favorite sauces, the puttanesca sauce.
I saw that in there.
All kinds of things. But it does give us this renewed connection. And as Paulo Coelho talks about inspiration, it's the literal breathing in of beauty and art and things that fill us with joy and bring us alive, that gives us this energetic state to try the bold action, to build our courage muscles, to step into what it is that is the unknown for us. and jump into the expression of our true selves in a way that is fully visible and vulnerable.
And remind the listeners, it's not about having a perfect end result, right? It's actually the process of creating.
Yes. And, Linda Berry, who's a fantastic artist and author, when she was in college, her art teacher told her one day when she was sitting there working on something, Linda looked up and said, I don't really like this. I don't even know if I like it or not. And her teacher said, it's none of your business.
Oh, I love that quote. I saw that in the book.
And she said that was the pivotal moment of her entire career, because all of a sudden she became freed from caring about the outcome. And of course, we want to make things that are lovely, that we love. But if we can release our grip on that, we will find the greatest joy and the greatest benefit of spending our time in our creative pursuits.
And so I would say that mindset of trying to make it into something is pulling us from the presence. And so when we have a mindset of, when I tell my artists this, will I sell this? Is it good? Is it trending? Is it fresh? We are not in the moment. And when you talk about being creative, it's really about, because at the act of true creation, you are in the moment. You have to be present to what you're working with, or else the glue won't stick in the, you know what I mean? You're very, right? It won't be in the right place. Or the paint will be, you know what I mean? You won't mix it right. You have to be very in the moment. And so it is a wonderful practice for presence, which is where my book came from. But the whole idea that when we create art, we are aligning with who we are, and in the creativity, the creator is going through us as us. We are a creator. So I think that's really, really wonderful and important. I wanted to tell you a couple of things that stuck out for me from your book, and then I want to bring up one more thing here too. You bring up the book, What Color Is Your Parachute? And I have to laugh, because do you know that book has really resonated with me? And I read it, in my 20s when I was first looking for a job. And I found that the exercise in there where you write stories, like you write out success stories. And then I think you go back and you look for a common thread in all of them. Go explain it, because I can't believe when you reference that, I was like, oh my God, this woman is definitely in the same realm that I live here. But go ahead.
Isn't that fascinating? It's just another signal of magic in the universe. So this book, if you're not familiar with it, is of course one of the greatest career books ever printed. And I bought this book and did all the exercises when I was visiting my grandparents at sort of a interim transition time in my life. And I literally did every exercise and even made that beautiful map with all the circles on it so I could see how everything intersected. And it was huge. It was like a 4x4 poster. But this notion of writing down these moments of your life that were times where you were especially happy and connected and feeling very good. And I don't remember his particular term for that or how he couched it, but I transformed this idea into calling it play histories, so that people who I was working with would be able to come at it as an adult, thinking back to childhood or 5 days ago, when they were lost in this moment of joyful creating or joyful experiencing something. And then I have people go back and circle the verbs and their histories. And we do, 5 or so of those short vignettes. And what happens is people's verbs tend to repeat, or they tend to have this interesting kind of common thread. Mine were wrote, led, created, played, launched, started. I was like, That's interesting. And I wrote that again. I was also in my 20s when I did that. So those are still my verbs today. So we can find some really powerful hints about this core essential self, the true nature of us, from digging into and doing a little archaeology of the self through play histories, and seeing how we are continuing to do those things today, or perhaps, like a lot of us, lost touch with those things. And it's a powerful reminder of what we put aside when life got busy or life got complicated. And we can now bring it back and put it front and center, rather than sort of stashed in the bottom of the junk drawer of our lives.
I read that and I was like, oh my gosh. And it is a wonderful exercise. It is, and it because it's sort of like what we're talking about with the morning pages. You step back and you see there's a pattern. There's a pattern of who I am, a pattern of what I would define as myself, my creative self, you know.
And it shows up. It's once you start to see it, you can't stop seeing it. After having been almost unconscious to it for years, maybe, then you see it everywhere. I had something very interesting happen about 9 months ago with this almost lavender color. This sounds so crazy. I first of all, I bought a Little Prince moleskin journal that was in this color. Then I was in an art class and I kept mixing this color. Then I didn't put any of these any connections among this until at the very end of the process. My color of my desktop screen is this color. When I was designing the first iteration of the cover of my book, that color was prominently featured. And then I had this moment where it was just like everything. I was like, oh, wow. I mean, it was, that color was everywhere. Then it became the Pantone color of the year for 2021. And I just was like, you got to be kidding me. But those are the kinds of things, again, the soul doesn't forget, and it keeps trying to, hey, look over here. Don't pay attention over here. And we have those things. And so these practices that we do through the 5 M's, and through making our art in a way that is completely unattached to outcome, we start to pick up, I really love to make these kinds of shapes, or this approach to brush strokes seems to be something that is integral to the themes of what I do, or whatever it is. It starts to, and then we start to pay attention. Well, if I'm really attached to that, maybe I should feature it more strongly or more prominently in my work, and see where that might take me.
That's exactly right. I love all that. I have people, I encourage my artists to keep a piece of paper on the wall, and they call it my tools. And so to notice what is unique to you, for me, I like these strong lines. I tend to like bold colors, certain types of stroke. And then you can choose to either push toward it and do a lot of it. And I even sometimes challenge them to stay away. Like, okay, here's an exercise. Don't do that. Do not choose that color at all. And in fact, I just told a guy at an art show who was kind of stuck. I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to do the style that you do, but I want you to, what is the color you hate? What color do you hate? And he goes, I hate pink. And I said, I want you to do one like this in pink. And he looked at me and he goes, oh, okay. Because I think it can move us. It's a tool that can move us. And going back to what you said about the colors, I had that same experience. And what I would say that tells about you is, I do believe in one mind, that there's a universal consciousness. And so when you start picking up on what color is the Pantone color of the year, you are not realizing that you're very attuned. that you're actually very attuned to that universal mind. That shows you that, because you're seeing it, and it's a subtle thing. You might be seeing it in certain places. You might see that people are gravitating toward it, but it shows that your consciousness is actually tapping in pretty good, you know.
Well, and there was also a book, a George Saunders book, that had the same color on the cover, that had a phrase in it that I wish I had committed to memory so that I could just dish it right out to you right now, but I can't remember it. But it's probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever read in my entire life. And I read that at the beach, which was a really pivotal point of creation during the book's process of coming into being. And so that color was almost kind of like a cheerful firefly of hang in there. Here's another little cool thing. Here's another thing that's going to give you the shivers. Here's another indication that you're on the right path. It was kind of that feeling of I had like a little tiny fairy godmother with me.
It's you know what it is? It's a recognition. That's a recognition that there is a divine hand. There's something guiding you. And I did actually, when I noticed, we go back to what I said earlier, when I noticed what color is your parachute, I'm like, I got to interview this woman. You know what I mean? And that was because it was a little sign. It was a little recognition maybe of myself in you. Mm-hmm. I'm recognizing myself in you. And when you talk about your morning pages and how it has propelled you, and you talk about being in marketing, those are all recognitions of that outside of myself. And so I love that. And I think that when we're tuned, like you said, when we're watching the thoughts that are coming in and out of our heads, when you watch all that, you start noticing that there is, and whatever you want to call it, I call it a greater power. Some people might just say an intuition, but there is something coming toward you and
it's
leading you.
It's to me, it is the most beautiful example, or one of the most beautiful examples of divine grace, and how we have we're all quantumly entangled with one another in very beautiful and powerful ways. And it's such a fun thing to start to unravel where those tendrils are connected. And
right.
So we have this sacred brotherhood and sisterhood with one another and with everything in the universe. And when we start to let ourselves feel that and recognize that, it is this beautiful hand. It is this little firefly. It is this powerful, almost invisible sense of buoyancy to not give up, don't turn back, and embrace the thing that maybe scares you a lot. And as Eleanor Roosevelt would say, have a go at doing the thing that brings the fears to you the most.
Right. And I think the 5 M's is a great way of doing that, a great way of enforcing that. So as we close this, I wanted to bring up one last thing because it was very moving, and I love to bring things moving up. But you talk about you talk this story about your father, and you talk about the story of his journal. And then I was reading your book, and I thought, really at the end, what she's telling you to do is create your own journal. It's you're doing exercises and activities and writings. And so you sit back and you have a journal and you go, this is who I am. So when I read that story about your father and you remembered this memory and then you found his book, what was that like? I mean, tell the listeners about this book.
It was just such an incredible moment or series of moments. So when I was in college and I would come home and work at his store in the summers, I became the shipping queen. And when I would ship all of the packages out to the customers who would call in from all over the country. And I was heading up the steps to get a shipping box yet again. And my dad stopped me at the bottom of the stairs and he said, "Do you want to see something interesting? Because I know how much you love paper." And I was like, "Ooh, yes. Let me see what you got." And he had this little brown vinyl book in his hands. And I knew immediately that it was gold, because I don't know if you're like me, when you see an inventor's notebook or an artist's sketchbook or somebody's journal, you just go wild with excitement because it holds this magic of someone working something out, someone thinking through the idea, someone's logbook of their voyage. And that just makes me delight in every possible way. So I started flipping through it and he started explaining to me. I wrote this when I was in the business school at Harvard, and I was thinking through how I wanted the business, which was called the Stone Lantern, how I wanted to design the front of the shop, how I was going to get the inventory in, how many sales per hour I had to make to stay afloat. Designs for the branding, designs for the wrapping paper, all of it. And I just loved seeing it. This little ring bound with tattered paper from the 50s. And at the time that was in the late 80s when I was looking at it. And I handed it back to him. I said, I thought that was the coolest thing, Dad. Thank you. Then later, and when I was creating my own vision for my real estate company, and this was at the end of 2010, I had a journal and I started to map everything out. I had forgotten about my dad's journal, but it was in my subconscious, obviously. So I mapped out everything for this business. And this was during the time that I lovingly refer to as my nuclear winter period, when everything in my life had completely turned to ash. My financial situation, my marriage, my health, it was a disaster. And so making this business work during a time when the real estate market was still not in recovery, it was still very much a struggling industry, especially in the community where I was. So this journal had to map it out. I had to be very careful, very thoughtful, and I had to be right on target. So I mapped everything out and created it down to the minutia and had great success. After my father died in 2015, I remembered out of the blue about this journal, and I became obsessed with finding it. And so I went to my brother-in-law, who is the manager of my dad's shop, and I said, "Do you happen to remember?" And I started to describe the journal to him. And he said, "Well, I don't really know, but there are some boxes of your dad's things upstairs." So I went up there and started rooting around and digging through it. And last box, bottom of the box, was the journal. And I was like, oh gosh. And so I was completely taken back to that moment in the 80s and started flipping through it. And I started to see it was this complete collapse of time and space, where there was no distance between that moment in 1987 and 2015, or actually it was 16 probably by that point. I was right there with him, and I was looking at the fact that my journal was almost completely mirroring what his journal was in terms of subject matters and in terms of how we approached our thinking, not the specifics of what we created, but our approaches to it, and how we both took what was in these pages and made it a reality, made it happen from that very careful and thoughtful planning. So, of course, it was hugely emotional, and it was just such a powerful affirmation of what I call the alchemical power of journaling, that you can bring into the world, what it is that you hold as your vision and your passion with this clarity. And these pages hold our dreams, and we can make them manifest in the world in a very powerful and completely detailed way that reflects what our intentions are.
Wow. It's a lovely story. And I don't know if you realize, I mean, that's basically what your book is. I mean, your book is giving people a map to create their own book, which I think is very interesting, you know, that you had this experience with your father and then you did it. And then years later, you almost recreate, okay, wait, this is important. This is important. How do I define, how do I uncover who I am and how do I remember who I am? So it's sort of like a book for that, you know?
Yes, it is. And what is spookily occurring to me in the moment is that that's exactly what the Sketchbook Entrepreneur Masterclass is that we take a large format sketchbook, and over the course of 6 weeks, we create this record, this map that takes us back to who we truly are and reconnects us with the creativity that is abundantly within all of us. And it becomes the logbook of where we're heading next. It's a journey in and of itself to create it. But then once you have it, there's all kinds of interesting, there's notes in there, there's ideas in there, there's artwork in there, there's poetry in there, there are pictures in there. And as you flip through it, you are reminded, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, these indications, like in the brush strokes or in the color choices or in the lines, that's who we are. And once we have that right, that is who I am. We have a very different sense of how we experience ourselves and how we show up in the world.
Oh, I love it. It's inspired me because I teach a class and that inspires me. I do a different way. I do like, I call them intentional meditations and help people remember who they are. But for me, it's all about finding those, that what you talk about, your unique tools, what is unique unto you. And that's exactly what Buoyant is. From an entrepreneurial perspective, mine's more from a perspective as an artist, you know, what stroke is unique to you, but it's what we're learning, right? Is it's all the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's all the same. And you can't lift yourself, you can't lift yourself artistically without lifting yourself as a business person. We're connected. It's all connected.
Yes. Yes. And it's a friendly connection. I think sometimes we're given the messaging that it's not a partnership of joy and happy experiences, that, oh God, I got to do this business stuff. Or the business person going, what, you want me to what with paint? Like, so we tend to believe that those worlds aren't beautifully inexorably connected, but they absolutely are.
And I love what you said, because we could keep talking and talking, but I love what you said. It is a friendly connection. I'm reading a book now on it's looking at the earth. The title's evading me, but it's about the environment. It was written many years ago, but how we have a false belief in competition, and that you can also, you talk about what we're learned, right? We are trained to believe that society is competitive. It's eat or be eaten. But when you look at the planet, you realize there's a synchronicity and balance of how everything is working in community together. You know, the plankton is feeding the fish, which is feeding the man, which is, you know, it all is a cycle, but in a healthy way, if you look at it as an eternal energy. And so I love that. Yes, it's not threatening.
It's a beautiful ecosystem of commensurate relationships. And once we step into that belief structure, it shows up everywhere in our lives.
Definitely. And it's a mindset, you know, change that mindset. And because you talk about walking, is it North Carolina?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Which I've always wanted to live there, by the way. I've never lived there, but I love the ocean and all. But you talk about that. You're very connected to nature and seeing that synchronicity and balance and community. It's wonderful.
Yes. And unexpected beauty everywhere.
Oh yeah, I love that too. I can go off on, I call them moments of awe, but so is there anything else you'd like to, I know we can, I mean, there's still a lot of tabs left in here. You know, there was one, let me see here. Yeah. Was there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners that I didn't cover?
Well, I think that one of the things that I want to emphasize to folks is that the seat of our power is not going to come from overdoing. And that's a cultural lore or lesson or message that is a toughie for us to break apart from. But I do want you to understand that being burned out or being overwhelmed literally reduces our IQ while it raises our anxiety. That is the boat going further and further and further away from us, the boat of creativity, the boat of inspiration. And if we can lean into and surrender into letting things be easy, letting ourselves take the time to do the 5 M's or one of the 5 M's, to replenish ourselves, to be kind to ourselves. I think we are routinely, unknowingly, quite mean to ourselves. We withhold rest, we withhold joy.
Yeah.
Just like what we were talking about, we'll do the to-do list before we do the fun thing. But I would like to challenge folks to start to think about those things in your own lives a little bit differently and embrace the idea that we can work a lot lighter and create our best work from that place.
I love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much, Susie. I encourage listeners to go out and get a copy or at any store, Buoyant, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Becoming Wildly Successful, Creative, and Free. This has been fun. Like I said, the commonality is just amazing.
It's just another fabulous indication of the beautiful universe. And I've been just delighted to be here with you today.
Oh, thank you. Likewise, I think you're exactly right. I talk to you and I go, see, it's everything's going right here. You know, if I have a moment of doubt with my life, I'm like, everything's going right. Look at the people that you're manifesting in your life, you know?
Exactly.
So thanks again. I might have you back, and I bet you there's more books coming. So
I would love that.
all right, thanks.
Let's play.
Let's play.